Hello and welcome to the Vlogging Pod. Tonight we are welcomed by A.M. Geever. How are you this evening?
I'm well. How are you?
I am not doing too bad. Thank you for asking. So,
Sure.
so that everyone else knows a little bit of your background, can you give us just a little bit of your background and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, my name is Annie. I write under AM. Why, I'm not 100% sure, but that, that was the decision I made back in the midst of time. And it seemed more impressive, I guess. So I've been writing off and on pretty much, most of my life. I got serious about it in 2009 or 10
Mhm.
and published my first book in 2019 and have been averaging about a book a year ever since. And I write post-apocalyptic fiction and disaster fiction. So I have two zombie apocalypse series. One's done, The Undead Age. The other, Steel City Apocalypse, still working on. I'll be releasing book 3 later this year. And then I also have a post-collapse EMP kind of powerless world series called Fire in the Sky. And the first book for that series, Darkest Light, was released last summer.
That's awesome. Everyone in the room's already hearing a little kitty.
That would be Buttercup, who has many feelings about not being allowed to be on my lap right now.
So now I have your site up on one of my screens in here, and you have 3 books in the Undead Age series?
Yes.
3 books, okay. And tell me just a little bit about that.
Well, the Undead Age series is set 10 years after the zombie apocalypse. I wanted it to be later because at the time I wasn't really interested in writing about the beginning. I felt like there were a lot of people doing that, so I wanted to try something a little different. It's set in Silicon Valley, which is where I was living at the time. And we've got a very not it's a society that's managed to not regress as much as you would expect
Mhm.
because when the dust settles, there are a lot of people with, very advanced technical skills who manage to kind of get things up and running again. But it's a very oppressive society in some ways. And the protagonist is a woman named Miranda. She is very great, very dysfunctional, and as a result of living through the zombie apocalypse, and she gets pulled into and in this world there is a vaccine. There's actually 2 vaccines. There's one you can get before you're ever exposed and you will never turn into a zombie. You might get eaten by one, but you
Mm.
won't turn into one. And then there's one that, if you get it within a certain period of time afterward and have to take it every day, you will not turn into a zombie, but that has turned into a political weapon. And so Miranda gets pulled into a plot to steal this vaccine and break this monopoly that the bad guys have on this vaccine to try and change things.
Nice. So now, as always, I do a little bit of research. Of course, you and I met through Podmatch, and it's a little easier
Mhm.
that way, but I still try to branch out, I swear. I try to do my research. So you've said that every great story is at its core a love story, not necessarily romance. Now, can you explain the difference and why that matters to you as a writer?
Sure. No, I came up with that idea after watching the film A History of Violence, which, doesn't sound like you would come up with that with a film of that title. But my husband and I sat down to watch it, and he said, "Well, this is a love story." And I was like, "Yeah, right." Get to the very end, the very last scene, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is a love story." And what I mean by that is, often protagonists in the story or even the antagonist, there's something they really believe in and they really care about, and that's what they're fighting for. So when I say it's love, not a romance, because it can be a child. Like, I don't know if you've read The Road. I just read that recently, finally. And, the father's love is for his child. That's why he keeps going.
Mhm.
It could be a person's love of country, or which is kind of what's going on with one of my character in Darkest Light. It could be an idea like freedom or, world domination. It doesn't have to be a good love. So but I think that, that core motivation, that thing that people care and love about so much is what makes, admittedly, in my opinion, really great stories love stories. Even tragedies can be animated by a great love and often are. And, it's the inability to really fulfill that promise of whatever stripe of love it is that makes it a tragedy.
Now, you did mention in the very beginning that you write post-apocalyptic, and I'm so grateful that I got that out because I am horrible at
It's a tongue
pronunciation.
twister.
It
It's a
is.
tongue twister.
Yeah, and if anyone listens to my podcast, they know I struggle with some people's names and some words or titles, like I've never heard
Mhm.
before, and so I'm absolutely horrible. So, yay me. Dystop You're right, dystopian and disaster fiction. Now, what draws you to those high-stake worlds, and what do they allow you to explore about humanity other than maybe other genres might?
Well, I like post-apocalyptic fiction just in general as a person, as a reader, as a viewer of television and films. I like seeing the way things break down, and I like seeing how it's built back up, what happens after. It's always what happens after for me that I find interesting. Rarely do I watch a post-apocalyptic film or read a book where or listen to an audio where the disaster is what grabs me. Not that it isn't interesting, but it's always the after. And I didn't really understand this until after I had started writing. One of the things I like about it as a writer is that the stakes are just so high. And because of that, you can really, really push your characters to great extremes and basically kind of torture them. But you could really, really make the stakes so, so high and so grim and so, life changing in a way that, I mean, the stakes in a romance, for instance, obviously, having your heart broken or a great love of your life fulfilled, like that's high stakes. And if it doesn't come to fruition, most times you are not going to die or turn into a zombie or a radioactive monster or be made into a mindless drone or whatever it happens to be in whatever story you're reading. And so I really like the stakes. I also like that really high stakes often put people into moral quandaries and really, really force them to make really uncomfortable, sometimes really devastating choices. And I like that. I like finding out, mucking around in their brains and finding out how that affects them. How do they live with it? How do they rationalize it? Can they live with it? How does it change
Mhm.
them? And, because I fundamentally I write because 'cause I'm very curious about people
Mm,
and what makes them tick. And, so the extremes are give you a lot of room to work with that.
right. I kinda understand what you're saying. I personally, with my writing, I like action driven. I'm more of the
Mhm.
female character as the main character.
Mhm.
I just love that. I love books that start right off with the action, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And then you find out about the all the background and what's happened in their past as the story goes along.
Right,
You
right.
f Do you find yourself drawing to that, or are you the type who likes the big chapters where you give the past and you talk about what this particular character is, or are you more as it goes along as sorta like what I do?
Yeah, I like to plop the reader right into the world, and they find out as they go along, you
Yeah, I
know,
love that, don't you?
you
I
know
just do. I love that.
Yeah, yeah, and because those big, long info dumps, they're
Yes.
boring, and
Mhm.
I don't think people really retain the information as well. Whereas if you find out that, I don't know, his Jimmy's dog was hit by a car, in the context of him seeing another dog almost get hit by a car, that's gonna have more of a emotional impact, and then it will probably stick with you. more so than
Right.
if I just, said, "And when in 6th grade, Jimmy's dog got hit by a car," and he listened.
Right. Well, and the wonderful thing about that, doing the way that you and I both like to do it, I find is that, say, I don't know, in your mind, you think, it would be great. This character has something tragic happen in their past that can twist the scene as now. And
Mhm,
a moment then of recap, but within the context of the storyline, you know what I'm saying?
mhm,
Can be it's just so much better because the more you give on the back tracks of their story, like those big lulls in the books, it's
mhm.
harder to have that moment of, "Hey, they could have had done this too." You don't tell everything at once.
Yeah,
Well, maybe
yeah.
yeah.
No, I agree with you, and I also think that, like, especially, I think you can do it with any genre. I think
Mhm,
especially in, like, fantasy and science fiction and, like, even action and thrillers, I think it
mhm,
lends itself especially well for the reader, adding another layer of interest for the reader to not really understand exactly what's all going on, and
mhm.
it gives them something to figure out as they are reading the story. Because sometimes you figure stuff out ahead of before it's revealed in the book, but you've had a good time connecting those dots. Whereas, and then sometimes you're just like totally floored. You didn't see it coming, but then when you look back and you see that all those breadcrumbs
Yeah,
were there.
yeah.
So I also think that gives it another added layer of interest for the reader. I know as a reader, I appreciate that, and I also think it kinda respects the reader, you don't need to spoon feed people everything, and they like to figure things out. So, I think that's another aspect of it for me as well.
Right, I understand that. I'm commenting to in the room as well. A lot of things from radio. Radio parlay, I think? Radio parlay in the room? He loves your cat. Um, so now you hold a Master of Divinity degree. Tell me about that.
I do. A Master of Divinity is a professional pastoral and theological degree. So basically, for people who want to go and be a minister in some capacity, whether it's pastoral ministry, working in a parish, or, working out in the community, working as a chaplain. And I mean, there's lots of different ways you can go with it, but it's basically a professional theological degree. So it's got obviously the academic side, and then it's also got some smidge of nuts and bolts, though it's pretty academic. So, yeah, because I thought I was going to at one point be a Unitarian Universalist minister, and it was a really great experience. I really loved school. I'm glad I did it. Some of my best friends to this day are the people I met during that program, but by the end, I realized I did not want to be a minister. So like most things in my life, I figured out what I wanted to do by doing something, realizing I didn't wanna do it.
I understand that. I went to college for a little bit too, and mine was in social sciences. So, and I wanted to
Mhm.
be a social worker and didn't quite turn that way. Didn't quite go exactly. Don't get me wrong, I went pretty far with it, but I just didn't finish, just didn't quite get all of it done. So,
Mhm.
when we talk a little bit back more about you, not me, what was the biggest learning curve for when you started indie publishing? I mean, what was the biggest thing
Mhm.
that, because we all dive into it, but what was the biggest learning curve? Like, you were like, "Oh, man, this"
Oh gosh, I wanna say everything. I think that's a really good question.
I try, I
I
try.
I think just trying to get my hands around then actually, you know what the biggest learning curve was? It was to start thinking about it as a business
Mm,
because and that took a little while. So that doesn't really answer your question in terms of when I first jumped in. when I first jumped in, it was just all the mechanics and the nuts and bolts and, like, you've got all these accounts to set up, and you've got these programs to learn, and you gotta find an editor, and, just all that nuts and bolts work that,
Mhm.
every single piece of it is new, or it was for me. That, it just I felt like I was, because we all say a learning curve. I felt like I was looking up at a learning cliff, and I was at the bottom of this cliff, and I had no idea how to scale it. And then but I got to know people, as I'm sure you did, online through Facebook groups and other writing mediums, and people start to throw you ropes.
Mhm.
And, you learn how to and people are willing to help you and tell you, explain things and whatnot and offer advice, which is really good, and then you may or may not take it. So yeah, because I just found the whole thing as I started overwhelming, and realizing that, like, the book was just the first part. The book was just the beginning, like, getting that
Right.
done, that's when the really, really hard work of, trying to get the book out in the world and build a readership. I mean, that was much harder than I thought it would be, and it took a lot longer than I thought it would.
I feel you on that. I started back in 2010,
Oh, the gold
and
rush.
yeah, yeah, I've been doing
You were there
wow.
for the gold rush, yeah.
Yeah, I've been doing it since 2010, and I'll be honest with you, I never have put it as far as a business for me,
Mhm,
but the 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 difficulty for myself is that my writing is a little different, and don't
mhm.
get me wrong, it as I've gotten more done, it's more cleaner, it's more polished
Sure, well, you
because
get better.
right,
Yeah,
every
I
author
agree.
does. But in the beginning, I did not realize that I was different, okay? Did not I did not see that, did not know that, and it came out in reviews, and
Sure.
I I published a book not last year, the year before that, and I didn't advertise it. I don't even know if it really got any sales. It was a continuation of the first books I came out with, and I
Mhm.
have about 5 or 6 I'm not even done with. I'm editing one now that I had put aside for a while, so I'm diving back into it, and trust me, I hate edits. Yeah, th
Yeah, you do. I have had 2 editors and that I've worked with so far, and for a while there, I was thinking I might try this editor that my friend was using, and, she did a sample edit for me. Now, she was fantastic. She was really
Mhm.
good, and she was too expensive,
Oh, it is?
sadly.
Well,
Um,
they're worth the money, but to be honest
but
with
you
you,
don't
as
always have the money.
no, and as authors, we don't make that kind of money, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Unless
yeah, yeah.
you're one of those
Those
big names.
Yeah, yeah, but I told her I wanted something a little more hands-on than what I had before, and as I was reading her edit, I was like, "Okay, I have to if I work with her, I'm gonna have to be really clear about what kind of stuff." Because there were a couple of things she did where, like, she moved one word and it, like, improved the sentence, like, 12
Mhm.
billion%, like, critiques and stuff. I like Claude. I think Claude's the best for writing, but one thing that was fun.
And I had one editor in the very first one of my very first books, she was like, "I don't think this character would do this." I'm like, "Who wrote this?" I think I would know what my character is going to do. Did I lose you? Okay, there
That's
you are,
funny.
yeah. So, let me steer this back just a bit. When we talk about the undead aged, I think it's Fire in the Sky. Now, is this gonna be
Fire
the new Go ahead.
Fire in the Sky is the newest book series that I've been working on, and that's the coronal mass ejection powerless world book, and it's part of a group project, actually. There's
Mhm.
13 writers writing in a shared world, the ravaged skies world, and, we have this agreed upon set of circumstances for this disaster, this solar storm that basically wipes out, almost all electronics across the globe. And then everyone's writing their own stories within it, and it's been a lot of fun.
Nice. So Now, from what I understand, there are a lot of impossible choices, no-win scenario types for your characters. Do you
Mhm.
find that difficult or something familiar since you already have visited a lot of this in the undead age?
Oh, no, I mean, that's just what I like to write about in general, you know? I mean, it's always kinda I always think of, like, Gone with the Wind. Melanie Wilkes always does the right thing. She's kind, and that's great, but, Melanie's not that exciting. The exciting person is Scarlett, who does all the wrong things or the self-serving things. She's opportunistic. She makes all the all the bad choices, but that's who people remember. That is the main character of the book, and that's why, because she is interesting, and it's her faults that make her interesting. When you're chronically good and kind and wonderful and virtuous, it's not that those are bad things, but you end up not being terribly interesting to write about.
So, a as we end this interview tonight, and we just talked about characters who are remembered, what is a one response to our listeners that you would hope they would remember about you and your work?
That it entertained them.
Entertain them. Awesome. And I'm gonna lie and say, what is coming next? That's my last question. How about that?
Oh, well, what's coming next is the 3rd book in the Steel City Apocalypse series, which is set it's a zombie apocalypse book. It's Our series is set in the same world as the Undead Age, but the 2 series don't, interlink beyond that, and that one's set at the beginning, and it's set in my hometown of Pittsburgh, PA, where I'm living now, and, so the 3rd book in that series, which is called Undead Impact, is coming out late spring, early summer. Just depends how quickly I can get all the editing done. But this particular one has been a bear. And then after that, I'll start working on the next Ravaged Skies slash Fire in the Sky novel. I mean, I'm sure you have the same problem. I've got so many ideas for
Yeah.
theories and stories and books, and there's so many things I want to write. But the next thing that's coming out is Undead Impact, and that's the Zombie.
I feel you about the ideas. I can't afford them because I already have unfinished work, so I can't afford more ideas. I'm supposed to be editing what I already have on my desk, and,
Oh, yeah.
it's slow go, but it'll get there, but for me, it's more because I enjoy it's not it's hard for me to look at it as a business, to be honest with you. I know, like I was trying to establish when you mentioned it earlier, I have not reached that point. To me, it's just like a new novel that I'm getting to read because
Mhm.
I'm not a big plotter. So I start out with a main gist, the character outlines, and I start out with the main idea that I want the book to go under. And then I just let my mind go and I update my character bios as I write.
As you go,
A
yeah.
Yeah, as I go. And so then it's like, "Oh my god, I can't wait to find out what happens," but it's me that writes it. And once I figure that, I'm like,
Right.
"Crap. Crap.
That's
Dang it."
so funny. That's so well, it's funny too because, like, even if you are a plotter, because 'cause I'm a plotter, and
Mhm.
sometimes the things change, as you're
Yeah.
writing 'cause you have an idea and whatnot. But, especially, like, a first book in a series, I always thought it was a writer thing that they said, like, just to say, to sound interesting and smart about how, "Oh, I was so surprised when my character did this or that or the other."
Mhm.
But, it takes a while to get to know your characters. Like, you've got you have made this person up, or, who knows, animal, depending on what your creature, depending on what you're writing.
A
But
little bit of both, everything, okay, I'm with you.
yeah, yeah, but you have made up this person, and you know their flaws and strengths and backstory and all this stuff, so you know how you know what you want them to do, but you also don't really know them because as you write the story, you start to get a better feel for the character. So, like, I always feel like I don't really know my characters till I'm done with the first draft, and even then, I don't. A lot can change. And I think that's why stories, at least for me anyway, that's a big part of why stories change, because
Mhm.
obviously, like, I have my plot and I have the action and blah blah blah, but I write character driven stories, it's the characters, and what they do and how they feel and what things cost them. I mean, it's the characters that drive my stories forward. So like getting a feel for them can take a while, and then it can really change
Yeah.
things.
Oh, yeah. I agree. I agree. Anyways, I will not keep you any longer. It was a pleasure to have you on.
It was lovely, lovely to chat with you. I really have enjoyed myself.
Well, anytime you wanna come back, it would be our pleasure. Anyways, thank you so much for being with. Thank you to our listeners. Until next time, bye-bye for now.